So, hi everyone, it's 12 noon. My name is Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of our Teaching and Learning Center, and you have found your way to our professional development series. We're to begin today, as we always do, with a land acknowledgement.
Let me know if the audio is audible and
Jean-V, I'm not hearing the audio.
Established under the As the first land grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is historically home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation, Missouri, in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many Native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
these truths
because we still remember.
Thank you. Our professional development series meets at noon on Wednesdays over Zoom all throughout the academic year. So we've had an event every Wednesday this fall semester, an event every Wednesday in the spring semester as well. This is our penultimate event, which is a fancy word for second to last. Our last event will be the week after fall break. So on December 4th, Melissa Glasser, who will be talking about work-life balance. So at the end of the semester, we're kind of loading up on those things that we need to do to keep ourselves, charged up and as healthy as we can be, engaging in things like self-care and support for ourselves, each other, and for our students. So if you come to enough events, you can actually earn a professional development certificate, and my colleague John-V is going to drop that information for us in the chat. You can earn a certificate as a graduate student or as a faculty or staff member. If you're a faculty member, you also have the opportunity to potentially be selected as a TLC Fellow. You can definitely check out that opportunity at that link. So today's speakers have a very, very important topic for us. They're going to be talking about mental health awareness and stress management. We have identified this as a need-to-know event. And I'm so excited that our colleagues are here. So without further ado, Doctors Mendez and Bhatia, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you.
No, that one.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. And just double click that. There we go. Can everyone see that? Awesome. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. My name is Karan Bhatia. This is Marcos. We'll kind of introduce ourselves as well, but super excited to talk about mental health awareness and helping y'all also just manage stress, especially considering the time of the semester we're in with everything probably piling up for y'all as well. We wanted to make this as interactive as we could as well. So if you do want to have your videos on, that would be great. Totally fine if not. But we do have some discussion questions and stuff, so you can feel free to shout out answers by unmuting or just put answers in the chat as well, and that should be good. But yeah, so talking about me a little bit, my name is Karan Bhatia. I am Indian, but I was born and raised in the UAE. I moved to the States in 2016 for my undergrad and have been here ever since. I'm currently the staff therapist and outreach coordinator at CAPS. I've been here for about 1.5 years now. And I got my degrees from Purdue University, where I did kinesiology and psychology, and then got my master's degrees in clinical mental health counseling and sport and exercise psychology at Ball State, which is also in Indiana.
And I am Marcos Mendez. I am from Argentina. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a staff therapist at CAPS. We'll talk more about CAPS in a little bit. I've been here since 2020, and I've done all my studies at K-State. Well, not all. My bachelor's was somewhere else, but it seems like a lot of the studies here. Did my master's and PhD at the CFT program here on campus. So I'm very proud of being a K-Stater.
Okay, so in terms of things that we will be covering today, firstly, just focusing on helping y'all gain some awareness about stress, what it is, what it looks like, and how it presents differently in different people. Before we go into identifying some coping skills to better manage it, and then we'll kind of transition into talking about supporting students with any kind of mental health concerns and how to have those conversations with them, and also helping yourselves and students identify like when to seek professional help as compared to when you can kind of deal with things by yourself sometimes as well. And then we'll kind of finish up with talking a little bit about CAPS and services that we provide for students over here, along with some additional resources to end with as well.
Okay, so let's get started in the topic of stress, which is something that all of us experience. This is common to all of us. And I want to start with sort of the technical definition of a stress, which is the body's non-specific response to any demand, pleasant or unpleasant. So it doesn't matter what the situation is, if it's internal or external, if it's pleasant or unpleasant. The stress is something that we feel it in our bodies and is a consequence of what's happening out in the world or with us. When we say internal, we mean thoughts and feelings or actions that we do that create a stress in our bodies. Most people consider the definition of a stress to be something that causes distress, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference, but that is not true actually. Stress is not always harmful, which distress is. Because it can increase, because the stress can increase productivity and performance if it is managed at a level that is that we can deal with, basically. So this is another way to look at stress, and this is mostly being shared with a lot of athletes sometimes because as you see, I think it was the x-axis is only performance, right? X, and on the y, stress levels. So if you have too little stress, you may feel maybe under motivated to do things. There's just maybe not much excitement to do things. If you get the right level of stress, then your body can begin to be prepared for action, and performance can increase in that sense. Our mental capacities, our feelings, and our behaviors are sort of maximized by this level of stress. This will be the optimum amount of stress. And if stress is too much, then that's what we consider distress, particularly if it's not only too much in the moment, but also if it's carried out through time, what we call sometimes chronic levels of stress, high stress. And in those moments, that's when our performance decreases And that's when we begin to experience sometimes some symptoms of anxiety, like worrying, panic, irritability, frustration, all the way to anger. Our body, it's just overrun. And sometimes we just can break down, like we burn out. And this may look more like what some people think of symptoms of depression. Tired, not wanting to engage, totally unmotivated, just feeling down, depressed.
Yeah, just overall, like Marco said, it's important to realize that it's normal, right? Like we all experience stress in our lives. We all experience anxiety in our lives, and we need some amount of stress and anxiety in our lives to be able to optimally function, like it shows in the graph. Because if we didn't have any stress or if we didn't have any anxiety, then like, why do you have a job? Like, why do you have goals that you're trying to work towards? Why do you feel motivated to wake up in the day, right? All those things do bring up anxiety, and that anxiety actually motivates us to perform at our optimal level. And then we think about when it gets too overwhelming or when there's too much stress, that's when the overload or the distress tends to occur.
So it is good for us to continue to make a distinction between the levels of stress, and we can have maybe, of course, to look at this as a continuum, or you can look at it as two different categories of stress. One is eustress. This is the optimal level of stimulation, and that varies very much from person to person. For one person, for example, a presentation may be something that produces eustress. They feel at optimal levels of stimulation. They elicit positive stress responses like awareness, concentration, just behaviors in general that are optimal. And then usually these situations can be perceived as challenging, attainable, enjoyable, worthwhile. They have a meaning. They generate a great sense of fulfillment, growth, development, mastery, and higher levels of performance. So stress is something that we want to welcome in our lives. That's something that Karan was mentioning earlier. That happens, and that's fine. Distress, though, is something that we need to begin to be more aware of. Distress levels are when we have too much stimulation. It's just too much for our bodies to handle. Again, it could be internal, external. It elicits a negative stress response. For example, we'll talk more about that. For example, belly aches. That could be a distress response that our bodies is feeling. Feelings of overwhelm, lack of control. In fact, stress, when we experience something as stressful, if we get the sense that we can control whatever is the situation, we usually experience that as eustress. If we feel like the situation is out of our control, then that might be more experience like distress, particularly if it's out of our control and we think that we should control it, which is sometimes a problem that we can get ourselves into. And if the situation is a threat to us, we'll be experiencing distress. Physiological responses pose health risks, particularly if they, as I mentioned, if they're chronic. And maybe sometimes what folks would do is try to cope with distress in maladaptive ways. And they might be associated with, like, for example, drinking behaviors in order to manage distress, which it may not make things better. It might make them worse for sure in the long run if those coping skills are to be continued. So I wanted to ask the question for you. What are some current sources of stress for you? And can you, as you mentioned those to us, either on the chat or just unmute yourself, can you begin to think about them if they are more eustress or more like distress for you, in which category they are? And I know the holidays are coming up, finals are coming up, so maybe some of those are some sources, but I'm curious to see what's coming up for you.
Holidays, yeah,
Stress,
yeah.
end of the semester.
Yes,
This is stress.
definitely.
Enjoying upcoming tasks, goals. That's eustress. Distress needing to improve a manuscript without knowing how. Yes.
Yeah, it goes back to that again, lack of control, right? When you don't really know or can't figure out how to do something, leading to that distress. Public presentations, looking out, goals and submissions. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and all these things are considered and impact the way that we function in our lives as well. And then thinking about some common sources of stress for students as well. There's a number of different ones. Moving to Kansas from home, whether not even within Kansas, separating from home and family and that sense of community that they had, a lack of social support for people when they first move into college. Interpersonal relationship issues like with their families, friends, professors, romantic relationships, that kind of stuff. Cultural experiences. Unfortunately, people like international students or minorities do tend to experience marginalizations or discrimination on campus sometimes, which can definitely be a big source of stress for people. Academic demands, obviously, peer pressure and comparing themselves to other peers and other students, and just sometimes work-related concerns that they have jobs outside of it as well, a lack of balance, increased freedom and responsibilities if they've come from a really protective environment at home and then coming here and not sure what to do with all the freedom that they've gotten and not sure how to balance the responsibilities that they have with school and that kind of stuff as well. Or lastly, even just like over involving themselves in different things as well. And then there's also additional sources for international students as well, like language barriers, the culture shock, especially kind of moving to America and the cultural systems that are in place, whether it be this aspect of meeting over overly exaggerated expectations sometimes, that initial euphoria of just like moving to campus and not really understanding or like talking to American people in general, adapting to the culture and life on campus and that kind of stuff as well. And then there's also the reverse cultural shock in terms of when they try to share their own cultures and values and beliefs with people over here, that tends to not always be received in the most positive way sometimes as well. And so that can be another source of stress. And then along with that, just a lack of social support sometimes as well. So overall, there's a lot of different cultural, physical, emotional, cognitive factors of stress and symptoms of stress. There are some specific identities that are likely to experience more a higher risk of distress and symptoms of depression and anxiety. Usually, students of lower economic status, students of color, female students, and just minorities and women in general tend to experience that as well. Or students with other responsibilities like for caregiving for children or other adults and other dependents and that kind of stuff as well. And so thinking about like, how do you know when you are impacted by distress? Like if you can put in the chat or just shout out like happens for you when you feel distressed. So what happens for your thoughts, your body, your feelings, emotions, your behaviors?
Itchy,
Yeah, issues sleeping.
body soreness,
Yeah, can't
tightness,
focus.
heart
racing.
races,
Yeah,
intrusive thoughts.
isolate yourself more. Yeah, yeah. Fatigue. Focus. It's like a restlessness, right? That itchy feeling as well. Eating, yeah, sometimes just like resorting to overeating or not eating, crying easily, going to sleep, sometimes oversleeping or not sleeping at all. Yeah, all these things like do impact you, and it shows that you have that awareness when you are experiencing any kind of distress as well, which is true, right? Like all these things tend to happen, and if you can notice, like some people have similar things that come up, like eyelids twitching, for example, or that itchy feeling. And some things tend to be different for people as well, right? And that's the biggest thing, is like everyone experiences distress or anxiety in different ways. So these are some things that you can think of that impact people physiologically, right? So thinking of the insomnia, or like trouble sleeping or sometimes oversleeping, your heart racing, you have a risk of a heart attack sometimes, other shortness of breath, for example, your palms tend to get really sweaty, or your body gets really hot or cold, right? The body temperature changes, right? So all these things, the stomach aches, like Marco said before, people tend to have like anxiety stomach aches sometimes as well. And one reason for that is also because anxiety tends to also impact your gut as well. And so I'm sure you've heard this before, but like you've probably like been told before, like listen to your gut or follow your gut feeling, right? A lot of times our gut is basically considered our second brain, right? So a lot of times our actual brain and the gut are very well connected through the nervous system and stuff as well. So a lot of times when you tend to experience any kind of anxiety, a lot of times it tends to impact your gut, and that leads to you having your stomach aches and that kind of stuff as well. So yeah. Any of the symptoms that you can see over here that you didn't realize that were associated with like anxiety or stress that you can see on there? Yeah, just reading through, or does nothing surprise you?
Yeah. Maybe one of the things that I think of is like, it's not surprising once I read them, like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that, but I can see how that will impact me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pounding heart. Ooh, there's a poem. Nice. We will get to that as well. Okay. Moving on into thinking about, you got this?
Symptoms of distress. I think you do.
Or was that me?
Continue.
Okay,
Yes,
never
you
mind then.
continue.
Yeah, so thinking about, again, going back to that distress, right? So like I said, there's physical symptoms, there tend to be cognitive symptoms, there tend to be emotional symptoms, there tend to be oh yeah, those were pretty much the three. So cognitive indicators, right? So that kind of firstly impacts your thoughts. specifically, or what kind of thoughts you're having, right? So a lot of times those are more like internal stressors that come out of an individual themselves, right? So holding yourself to higher expectations than realistic or achievable, low self-esteem, right? Having a fear of failure or embarrassment sometimes, impacting your ability to make decisions sometimes, right? Or impacting your focus or your concentration and that kind of stuff, as well. Then we have the physical things that we talked about already previously, but like again, headaches, sleep issues, appetite changes, fatigue, your immune system tends to get weaker, so it makes you more susceptible to illness. Then there's emotional indicators, so thinking about like your moods changing really rapidly. You tend to be sad for long periods of the time, or constantly worried or feared, or you're feeling like really short-tempered or irritable very easily. And then there's behavioral indicators, right? So all these three, the cognitive, the emotional, and the physical indicators tend to impact our behaviors, right? So it leads us to kind of isolating ourselves more from other people, working more, overworking ourselves to try to like make up for it. And in turn, that leads to you getting less done or taking longer to finish tasks that you would usually finish really quickly, right? Or getting distracted really easily, or like impacting your relationships, or sometimes, unfortunately, resorting to substances such as alcohol or cannabis or nicotine to kind of cope with it, which not like helps, right? Like using those some substances does help in the short term, but it is in the short term, and you want to think about how these substances and using them impact you in the long term as well, because in the end, it's helping you kind of avoid these symptoms one way or the other, instead of addressing it, and avoiding it isn't really taking it away in any way. So kind of thinking of that as well. But yeah, so thinking about self-awareness, you got that?
Yes. So I'm hoping that this is a time for us to sort of stop for a second. We know we live busy lives, and sometimes one of the problems that we have is that we are not aware, we don't realize how much the semester at work, but also life at home, family, extended family, how many things we are carrying. And if we're not aware, then we cannot do much about it. So I'm glad that to hear so many of you responding to some of the causes, the sources of stress, and already describing for you some of the cognitive, the emotional, even the behaviors that may be letting you know that you are experiencing the stress. And I'm glad that you also got a chance to read other people's sources of stress and how it been impacted, because they may make you think about, well, I wonder if that is how I'm being impacted myself. Is that happening to me? And so this presentation is great in some sense because it allows us a little space to just think about it, to think about this important topic, and then try to talk about what are some of the things that we can do to manage the levels of stress when we are noticing that the levels of stress are becoming distressing. They're too high for too long, and we need to do something about it. So we are going to be talking about reducing our vulnerability to distress. And there are many ways to coping with stress, and not all of the coping skills work for everyone, which is fine. Just like there are not one symptom of stress. A lot of people experience stress differently, and a lot of people manage this stress differently. So for you, what are some of the coping skills that you use to manage distress? We want to read some of those, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that.
Exercise, yoga, physical activities in general, nice. Listening to music. Taking a break, a real break.
Nature, love that.
Yeah, being outside. Naps,
Zumba, yay.
like that. Nice.
Music, yeah. So dancing, naps, great. Reading. But those are great. We'll talk about some of those and a few more. Okay. Yeah, not necessarily healthy, but a sweet treat, which is
You gotta
fine.
treat yourself.
Yes.
It's fair.
You know, from time to time it's good. Petting the cat, yes. Kitten therapy, yes. Anything chocolate, that's right. So okay, so coping skills, or coping techniques. There are some basic self-care techniques that we always encourage to all of our students, patients. And those, they are called the vulnerability factors, because if we do them, we know that stress tends to be managed. However, when stress increases, we also noted that some of these things don't tend to happen as much. So, and there are the four heavy hitters. One is making sure that you have a good sleep, what they call sleep hygiene or a sleep routine. So you can make yourself go to sleep, like fall asleep. However, there are things that you have control over, and that will be your sleep routine. So for example, making sure that you are not on a bright light sort of device very, very soon before you want to go to bed and sleep. Do whatever it is that you need to do in order to prep for going to sleep, like taking a shower or reading, or that is very important. Healthy consumption of food and water generally, as we mentioned earlier, having a treat once in a while is fine. That's not a problem. But generally speaking, for your body, whatever that is, have a healthy consumption of food, making sure that you're not skipping meals when you are in distress. That tends to make distress worse, because we need to nurture our bodies. Some form of physical activity. We're not talking about here like very intense for a long time daily physical activity, like walks, 30-20 minute walks outside, 2 classes to the car, walking the dog, your pet, even doing things around the home, pulling weeds, mowing the ground, mowing the grass, I should say. Any of that will count as physical activity, and it tends to be very helpful for de-stressing, for releasing some of the tension. And then social support, making sure that you have friends, family, pets count as social support, that you can feel supported by. Okay, some more coping techniques. Deep breathing is something that is used for relieving this, relieving stress. We talked about music. Regarding deep breathing, if you Google deep breathing or breathing exercises, there will be many many videos, even on YouTube, of explanations of different types of deep breathing. Arts and crafts can be very helpful, like even like puzzles, crocheting. Laughing is actually really good. There is if you put on YouTube laugh therapy, there is such a thing as laugh therapy. It's actually kind of comical just to watch that video. But we know that the things that we do affect the brain structure. So even engaging in a half smile, engaging the muscles of the face that are connected to smiling actually already changes the brain chemistry. So things that we do change the way that we feel. So if you have ever done yoga, they usually they encourage you to have a half smile while you are trying to balance. That's why it's so helpful to laugh at times, have a half smile, meditate or pray, be in contact with nature, find things that connect you with a spiritual being, whatever that is for you, whatever religion you may have. Develop self-compassion. This is a sense of self-love, acceptance for who we are as a whole, meaning acceptance the strengths and some of the shortcomings that we have, and developing a sense of connection with who we are as a whole. If you click on this, I think you have access to the PowerPoint. So if you click on this links, it will take you to a website. This is called selfcompassion.org. I encourage it for you. Help someone else. That can be super helpful in as a coping skill. Cook for someone, bake something and bring it to work. That can be very stress relieving for some. I put here two projects that are a part of the on-campus, the Bandana Project and the Thrive Navigators. You can look them up by just writing those on Google. Talk to someone who is supportive, of course. Managing your time with a schedule. Those are more like tips. Set a routine and set them up on your calendar, like a daily routine. Make lists with priorities. That can be helpful when we are under high levels of stress. Journal can be helpful. Write what you are grateful about, particularly if you are a person that tends to get pessimistic, if you're very critical of others and yourself. Finding time to develop those muscles, those brain connections that help us look at the bright side, that can be very helpful to de-stress. Take breaks whenever needed. It could be like a 1-minute break. It could be a breath. It could be an hour. It could be half a day. Take breaks whenever you need them. Take a mental health day or vacation. So, sometimes it requires a day or just a weekend, but sometimes it's required to reset your body. We talked a little bit already about spend time with nature. These are some coping skills that I also find that are helpful, particularly for folks that if they are at a level of distress, they tend to enter more in what we call here maybe more like an anxiety attack, and they need something to ground themselves. Physiological side has proven to be very, very effective in managing stress. There is a link to a 4-minute video that explains how it's done and the positive consequences of practicing this when you need it. Just put some cold water in your face to sometimes kind of shift your thinking, shift your emotional state. That can be helpful. Five senses is a grounding technique that we teach sometimes to some of our students, which is to be allowing yourself to engage your senses, because that helps us be in the present moment. Many times, some of the distress, as we mentioned earlier, are wrapped up in the anxiety, in the over-worrying, in the thinking of what may happen. And so we project and we think about the worst case scenarios, and grounding yourself allows you to be more in the here and now, not so much in your head. So you can say out loud, even if you can, or if you're in a meeting, just in your head, 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you can taste, and that's can ground you. Or even like take a cold shower. If, of course, if you're at home, you're feeling very, very distressed, taking a cold shower can help you reset.
All right. I'm sure a lot of the things that you've heard Marcos talk about is probably things that you've heard before, right? A lot of these things, sometimes we know these things, we know what we need to do to help us, and then it's all about like getting started with that as well, right? So sometimes we just need reminders of that, right? Like these are some things that are helpful, and getting started with them and taking small steps to like incorporate these things into your daily routine. You don't have to always wait to get to a point where you're like overwhelmingly distressed to act on these things. You can continue to practice these things every day, because just like any skill, it takes some time to master as well. So thinking about that. And just for the sake of time as well, because we do have things to get to and everyone else needs to leave as well. Just thinking a little bit about recognizing if students are in distress, right? So thinking about, these are some examples of specific behaviors they may display, or you may notice in them as well. And so thinking about a number of different issues academically or behaviorally, in terms of interpersonally, in terms of asking, they come up to you for any personal issues that they're dealing with, or a lot of mood issues that they're having, right? Or things that you notice in terms of their personal hygiene or the way they're dressed. Or thinking about even like references to talking about suicide or homicide or death as well. The first thing is, you do not have to always like do something about it in the moment, in terms of like trying to do any kind of interventions or like therapy or anything like that, because it's not your role, right? Your role is to be a source of support for your students. And sometimes students really value that, which is really great. And so if they do come to you with any of these issues, your goal is to firstly collect as much information as possible. And in terms of doing that, you want to be direct with them about it, right? Like give them a private space so that you both have time to talk about it. Give them the space and listen actively to what it is that they're trying to say. You can communicate, and active listening involves re-emphasizing back or reflecting back what they said to you as well, and then instilling hope as much as you can, and continuing to maintain those clear and consistent boundaries as well with students. And then if you realize like this is way out of my scope to help, then talking about referring to other resources on campus that we'll get to as well. So a couple things to think about in terms of like when to ask for professional help, right? So thinking about like, if an issue is taking up at least an hour a day that you're caught up like thinking about it or worrying about it or trying to do something about it, the issue causes embarrassment or makes you want to isolate from others or not share this with anyone else. It impacts your quality of life or impacts your relationships as well. Or you've made changes in your life to or developed habits to cope with the issue, such as again, using substances or like alcohol or drugs to kind of cope with it as well, and how that impacts your daily living as well. So different things that you can kind of notice and realize, okay, this is something that I need to talk with a professional for, as compared to, there are things that using the coping skills that we talked about can be managed by yourself as well. But here are a couple of things to help you realize, okay, maybe I need to seek some more professional help as well. So thinking about that and transitioning into CAPS and what we offer here.
Yeah, so if you have a student that is needing some assistance, that's what we are here for. We do provide resources to students. And this is some of us. Our website is not fully updated, so we are missing a couple of pictures here. But we do have a therapy dog named Link, who probably is the most famous of all of us, and the most sought out for outreach and things like that. So we are right now currently 6 full-time psychotherapists. That's not counting the associate director, so it'll be 7 with her. And we provide confidential and culturally competent mental health resources to K-State students. And this is a way, when you refer them, if they have any questions, you can let them know that we have almost like 2 ways to get in touch with us. One is by walking into CAPS and talking to the front desk. We are at the first floor, Lafine, and they will be asking to talk to a therapist. The other way that they can connect with us is through making an appointment, which is you can do by calling, or the day before or the day of. You can get on your portal, Lafine portal, and you can set up a consultation appointment. If there are no consultations available, there are 40 available consultations every week, so 8 every day. But if those are filled and we are seeing clients, then the person is encouraged to try the next day. Most students are able to get on our schedules, but some of them may have to try a couple of times. And then there are 2 types of consultations that they will probably be meeting with us for. One is just a regular clinical consultation, but if during the request of the consultation they meet criteria for a crisis consultation, we do have therapists on what we call on duty to meet with these students who may be needing particular risk assessment, develop a safety plan or something to that extent, maybe even like a referral to the crisis stabilization unit if they don't feel like they can keep themselves safe, or to the ER for further assessment. And then I want you'll be talking.
Yeah, thinking about and in terms of even scheduling those appointments and stuff as well, students can either come in person to try to do that, or they can even call over the phone. Or this semester we've started to offer the ability to create those appointments online as well through their Lafine portal. So they are able to do that online at least 24 hours in advance as well. In terms of other services at CAPS as well, we offer some workshops, and these are offered asynchronously, so they're basically added onto their Canvas page. And each of them kind of focuses on learning some different skills and coping tools to be able to manage whatever it is that they're coming in with. And so that's kind of a list, and then if you click on the link, that would take us to take you to our website to get some more information on what each of the workshops entails. And then there's also groups. And so there is 2 different types of groups that we offer. And the types of them, firstly, is like a skills group, which tends to be more of like a structured group focused on learning a specific skill, such as Taming Your Anxious Mind is focused on helping you learn and be aware about your anxiety, and then learning specific coping skills to better manage it. And then there's process groups as well, and these are more focused on specific populations and allowing a safe space for them to kind of come together and support each other. So there's no real like structure or goal or skill that they're working on specifically. It's very much more member-led, and we try to help them identify what it is that they're trying to work on while supporting each other and getting feedback from each other, while also learning more about themselves as well. And then we have individual therapy and relationship therapy as well. And individual therapy is what most people obviously come in for. And so there's no real limit on sessions per semester, but we do follow a specific model at CAPS, which is more short-term goal-oriented models of therapy. And so we mostly work with conditions focused on anxiety and depression, but it's not just focused on just that or limited to that. There are many other issues that would be a good fit with this model. And if we do realize that there are any kind of issues such as like an extensive trauma experience and that kind of stuff that would require more longer term forms of therapy or seeing someone more frequently, we kind of bridge that care and help support them in finding a provider in the community as well, and then kind of support them through that process as well. And then we also have psychological testing services as well. So with like ADHD assessments, which is the only kind of thing, service that has a cost associated with it. If you are interested, you can definitely ask us for more information about that. And then doing outreach, coming to different classes and dorms and tabling events and that kind of stuff. We often do that to provide more information about services and offer, again, another source of support as well. And we are located in the ground floor of Lafine Health Center. You can definitely call us, email us. Our email is also council@ksu.edu if you have any questions. And and check out our website as well for more information on services.
Some of the things that we also do, some referrals, internal referral to campus resources. So we work very closely with student support and accountability, the care office, academic achievement center, the K-State Family Center sees families, couples, but also they see individuals. The Spectrum Center work with them too. And then we also do referrals off campus, and that is to community providers. We have TELUS app, which is a 24/7 connect with your therapist through an app by calling or chatting. And then here's a list of 2 websites that I usually send students to. And then for faculty, because we do not provide services for them, we wanted just to leave you with, and I'm pretty sure that you probably are aware of the EAP, the Employment Assistance Program. They do have confidential emotional support. I believe the last time I heard that you get 8 free sessions for anybody who is panel with our EAP program. And that I think it gets renewed with any different like episode. So if you're coming in for something else, then you get another 8. And then there are others assistance with like work-life solutions, like finding your child care if you recently moved here and you're trying to kind of get settled, or if you are moving away, then that's something that they can help with. Planning events, locating paid care. Legal assistance, you do get a 30-minute consultation with an attorney. So if you have any need for that, you can contact the EAP. And then also financial resources like retirement planning, taxes, budgets, and things like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and the engagement that we had in the chat as well. It was awesome to see. We want to open it up for any questions, comments, feedback that y'all have for us as well. We have to kind of rush at the end over there, but yeah, so couldn't get to everything.
So I want to say I really appreciated the practicality of the advice that you shared. I feel like sometimes, I'll go to these events and they'll say, yeah, stress is a bad thing. You need to do something about it. But the number of practical things that we could actually do for ourselves and recommend to our students, I think was fantastic. And I really just wanted to kind of note that.
Thank you.
So are there any questions for our presenters today? All right, so I'm going to ask one. So for all of us walking into class that last week after fall break, right before finals, what's something we can do in class, something that would, work for almost all of us, that would kind of make the situation a little bit better for us and our students?
So one of the things you can ask them to do is to take a deep breath. Or if you feel comfortable leading the physiological side, that would be also amazing, which it looks a little bit like this. Very easy to do, and is proven to decrease levels of stress in the moment. So it will be something like this. You inhale all the way to the top. when you reach and you think that you can have any more room for more air, you sneak one more. And then you exhale very slowly. And you can do that 1, 2 times, 3 times.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's a question in the chat. You may have seen it or not.
Yeah.
So someone, oh, sorry, go ahead, please then.
You're good. Yeah, I was typing it in, but it's all good. I can just speak faster. But that's a good question. I think, firstly, in terms of you being a co-instructor and your part has ended, I think the biggest thing is you're still connected with them and had some sort of a relationship with them, if even though it was in the short term. And I'm pretty sure they would still have your contact information as well. And so if you would want to reach out to them, whether it be maybe like sending them a message through Canvas, through an announcement or something like that, or just sending them on an email saying, hey, I know that I'm not currently instructing or working with you or seeing you as often, but if you do have any questions or need any more support, like feel free to reach out. It very much depends on your comfortability in terms of what you want to do, and kind of goes back to, again, like establishing your own personal boundaries and that kind of stuff as well. Because I really appreciate that you want to help everyone as much as you can, but you want to make sure that you're able to kind of take care of yourself as well when you need to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you do not have access to them because you're not in the classroom, maybe you can convey that message through the co-facilitator of that. You can send a message that maybe they are able to read. I would, if I was a student, I would probably want to hear that my instructor really cares about me.
Yeah.
Thank you again. I want to just again note the advice is so practical, and I really find that that's so helpful for all of us. At this point, we are about out of time. So if people here would join